Good day, everyone, and welcome back. Well, we are on episode 5 of the ISU 152, the Beast Killer project, and boy, we have a busy episode this week. Well, we'll start off with the figures, and this will be the first time I've used Panzer Art as a reference company, and this will be my tank guy that's just kind of sitting on the back edge there. And then I'll also have this refugee dude, and he comes from Royal Models. Okay, so now with the painting. Here's where I'm at with painting. I have finally come to the conclusion and gotten to the point where it's just like, keep it really, really simple. I don't know why, I was all kind of knotted up about painting figures, trying to do it one specific way, so I kind of backed off a little bit. You've seen my process over the last, well, almost a year now, basically a year, and I've just really simplified the process. So here's what I've come up with. Well, I've come up with some blurry video. That's the problem right now. So we'll get around that. So the first step is to give it a base color. And with that, I'm using burnt umber. And here's a photograph of this dude. And I do the burnt umber, and then I do like the mahogany, which is a dark reddish brown tone over top. Next, I start adding those highlights. Now, this is nothing revolutionary, but I just started adding a few highlights in those lesser areas. So in the bridge of the nose and the top of the cheeks and the top of the chin and things like that. In order to better illustrate with actual video that's not so blurry, let's move over to the civilian dude. We'll get back to the tank guy in just a little bit, but for the face we can do the same process. So he has the base coat of the burnt umber, and now I'm just starting to build up some of these highlight layers. Now what I've found here, and this is kind of my thing, first I'm not using the airbrush. That's something that seemed to be unnecessary to me. Just the dark brown, the burnt umber in this case, the reddish brown for the second layer. And then what I've found that's working for me best is that I start popping out those really top layers, those real highlights. So now we're talking about the top of the nose, the top of the lips, the tops of the cheeks, the forehead, those types of things. And that gives me that contrast. And I have my deepest shadows and I have my almost brightest bright sitting there. And now it's just a matter of blending back and forth between the two. And I found that that is such a much easier process than saying building up from the bottom up or the top down or something like that. And then those aha moments where you realize that little dabs, little stippling motions are actually the way to do this rather than paint strokes. Well, that was kind of a game changer as well for me. So anyway, I guess you can teach old dogs new tricks. Even though I've made progress, I'm not skilled enough yet to try to pick out the eyes and the pupils and things like that. So I just leave those in a dark, in those shadowed areas, and I think that looks okay, especially at this scale. And then let's start working on the helmet a little bit. Again, he's been painted base coat with that burnt umber, and now I'm just going to bring out some of those contours with just start brightening some of those edges a little bit. This is so easy to do, and that's, I guess, where I'm at with this figure painting thing right now. Once I kind of started to relax a little bit and not take it like so seriously, all of a sudden it started to make sense, and I was able to focus in on it. So I guess that just takes practice to get to that point. Kind of like playing baseball. Pretty soon everything slows down and you can see the pitches. So maybe I got there with the figures. Same thing with the torso, the body, the uniform. Base color, just paint it on. This is the burnt umber once again. Just splash it on there. Nothing fancy here at all. And then back to just what works and is easy. Now this jacket has a lot of texture. It's basically a quilted type of a jacket. A lot of texture. So let's just do a little bit of dry brushing. And I've found that actually dry brushing is a fantastic tool for figure painting. The sculpts are so good these days that if you find a figure that's got a lot of good texture onto it, you can get 80% there just doing a little bit of dry brushing. Then once I have the base colors established, now it's time to come back in and start adding some of those highlights. And now this starts kind of following on traditional figure painting, where I'm hitting the upper edges, the zenithal highlight, what gets there from the sunshine. Same idea with the trousers, just get back into them. So just adding basically the base color. A lot of that was done through the dry brush. And then back to the same idea with the face. Just pull out the brightest highlights right off the bat here. Just basically one extreme to the other. So the darkest shadows are there, the base color's there, and then I just pull out all the edges, the highlights, and the brightest parts of the trousers. In this case, his knee is up, so the top of his leg there is going to be very bright. And so I'll just block that in right away. Now I have my two extremes to work between in terms of adding my shading and shadowing and blending. I get to this stage and I'm ready to go ahead and start gluing things together. I've got his head, just kind of plop him into place. Let's get him adjusted there, just pop him in there. He's got a hand here. He's been drinking a little bit here, so we'll put him in there with his bottle. He's going to do a little celebrating. I think this scene, actually, it's a Battle of Berlin scene, but let's place this just a couple of days, perhaps, after the end of the war, the surrender. And then once the glue dries, here we go. And yeah, he looks okay. Of course, he's not going to be sitting on a box like that. He's going to be on the vehicle. So let's see what he looks like kind of in place on this back side of the ISU 152. Again, we're kind of looking at that reference photograph as our cues here as to where to place the figures and, you know, a little bit of the story again from the reference photograph, even though we'll deviate. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank my patrons. They make this all very possible. If you'd like a little bit more content, that's the place for you. The link for the Patreon page is in the description below. Over there, I post photographs of the projects as they're ongoing. I talk about the future projects, even photographs and videos of the future projects as they start to unfold. Early viewing of the current videos before they go out to the public. We have a Discord server where we have a lot of chats. It's a really great community. Please consider joining. Speaking of deviations, the civilian guy, he's pushing that baby stroller full of his belongings, and I don't know if it came to me kind of crumbled up and broken or just in terms of trying to cut the resin off the little sprues, but a lot of this was shattered up and not in great shape. So it took me a little while here to kind of reconstruct some of the, especially the framework underneath where the little buggy wheels attached to the frame. Most of this is just together with a little bit of styrene. And then once I got it together, then I found out everything was warped as well. So a little bit of heat from the hairdryer, just on a low setting here. Nothing very dramatic, just to get it warmed up. And I can hold it in place for just a second or two and a few back and forths. And there we go. We've got our little buggy ready to be painted. Just a quick timeout. If you do like this channel and like the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It does help me so very much to get this channel out to more and more viewers. Videos come out generally on Tuesday mornings. I've been doing premieres, which allows for a little bit of a chat at the same time. There's a bell notification down there. Hit that and please join us. Returning back to the model. So let's get this ready for the scene. So we've worked on the tracks. We've worked on all this stuff before, but there needs to be a little bit more weathering, in my opinion, on some of this lower hole business. This is the same process we've been using all the way through. So the same as on the tracks and even on that exhaust, which I add just a little few dabs of oil paint into certain areas. And then I come back in with the pigments and just tap that into place. Once again, the oils and the pigments blend and they give color back and forth to each other. And of course, once the oil paints have dried, everything is locked into place and set permanently. Adding a little bit of stains, simple as well. Just a little bit of darker color around some of these wheel hubs there, maybe indicating a little bit of oil leak or maybe moisture, something like that. Super easy to do. Once again, the pigments kind of soak it up. Gets a very, very natural looking appearance to it all. Here, we'll take a little bit closer look at it here. I'm using a little bit of that engine grease this time, the Abteilung 502 Abteilung engine grease. This is a wonderful color. We're going to use it again here in just a few seconds here. But it's got this transparent nature, so it stains super nicely, this light brown color, and especially in combination with the pigments, it's a really nice color to use to show stains or shadowing and things like that. Once the pigment and the color is established, use a clean brush, nice soft brush, and just kind of tap and blend everything together. See how simple that is? We worked on the tracks in the last episode, and we got to a certain point, and I made mention that maybe they needed a little bit of weathering, and off to the side I am working on the base. That will be in the next episode, and in order to start tying things together, I really did feel like they needed just a little bit more dirt and grease and grime and just yuckiness. So same process as we did initially the first time. Just take a little bit of the oil paints, put it in certain locations. I'm not trying to make these super heavily weathered. They're not dirty necessarily, but I wanted to add a little bit more crunch to them, if that's a technical term. A little bit of oil paint first in some of those track links, add a little bit of the pigments into there, let that set for a little bit, and then come back with a clean dry brush, just a nice soft brush, and take off any excess. One of those final details that really makes heavy metal look heavy metal is that graphite, that metallic edge on things. Two ways of doing this. You could do it with pigments, which I'll do as well, or you could just use graphite from a pencil. Just use a little bit of sandpaper, give myself a little bit of a graphite on my finger, and just lightly, ever so lightly, touch around some of those edges there, just to give them a little bit of a metallic sheen. Hit some of those bolt heads, some of these edges along here. Any of those areas that are just a little bit harder to get to with your finger, just go ahead and use the tip of the pencil. Just basically kind of buff it in there, draw it in there, and just kind of, I like to use the edge of the lead here, and that kind of polishes it, hits those high points only, and that just shows a little bit of that metallic sheen from, say, the crew movement and wearing off the paint down to the metal finish. One of the last things I want to do is reestablish some of those, again, higher traffic, higher wear areas on the vehicle. We did this earlier on in the initial oils, so when we did the initial weathering of the vehicle. I think that was, what, episode 2 or 3? I don't know, I have to take a look. But I still want a little bit more of that griminess, that greasiness that you get from just the crew moving around and wearing the dirt into the surface. So let's move back to what is now becoming one of my go-to colors here, which is the engine grease, and there is ever so slightly, just enough just to discolor the brush slightly, and I'm just the lightest, a little amount of tapping onto these surfaces here, and I'm just dropping a little bit of color there in these high traffic areas. So around the hatches here, along where the grab handles come up, where the crew might climb on top, just to add a little bit of darker shades and a little bit of grittiness and earth and dirt tones there. But we're not done yet. We're going to have to blend this together. So just adding the color is not enough because that's just too stark. So I have a very clean brush, very soft, and now it's a matter of just burnishing or polishing, and in a lot of cases it's removing the paint as well. So you'll see from time to time here where I will move the brush off to the side, and that's me unloading, or that's unloading the brush with any color that's on the brush, because I really want a clean brush, pull back some of this color. So even though I just added it, I really want to take some of that color back off. These are the very final steps, so everything is pretty subtle at this point. So don't go crazy with these types of effects, I guess is what I'm saying. And then finally, we'll do just a little bit of pigment here, and this is just to basically reestablish some of, or establish some of the dirt that will be tied in with the scene itself. But also the pigment and the oil paints, we're doing that same combination. Even though there's not a lot of oil paint here on the surface, the pigments will soak a little bit of that up. It'll go a long ways to blending this out and make it look more realistic. Nice soft brush. You can tell there's not a lot of pigment on those brushes at all. Just moving it around, just kind of tapping it around into place. And you can see I'm concentrating towards the front of the tank because the crew would have probably entered their hatches from the rear of the tank. So a little more dirt and grime towards the front. As I say that, of course, I moved to the rear of this hatch. Oh well. But you can see I'm not adding a lot of pigment. I'm mostly just kind of washing it across just to blend things together a bit. And then the final thing that we need to do is ruin our vehicle here. This is where you take, oh my gosh, take that deep breath. Remember these photographs? Well, we have those 2 hits to the gun barrel there, and we need to take care of those as well. Now, I don't know how to do this other than just, like I said, take a deep breath and go for it. So I've got some small drill bits here and kind of find the more or less location I can reference from the photographs and just try to get a hole started here. Probably should have used the tip of my blade first just to kind of score it. If you put a little indentation there, it gives the drill bit something to bite into, but I'm able to kind of work it in here. A couple of twists. There we go. We got a hole started. And I'm using a pretty small bit at this point because if I mess this up, if something goes really wrong, it's an easier fix. Well, there we go. We made it through. Let's do the second hole up here on the muzzle brake. Yep, we've got 2 layers of plastic to go through right there, but it looks like we've made it through there as well. Okay, now that looks fine. Now I just want to enlarge these a little bit. I could use a bigger drill bit, but instead I just take my knife and twist it around a little bit. It's actually easier to do it this way, I find. You can kind of control the size of the hole, basically. You can keep going, make it bigger, or stop at any time, and there you are. Next, I need to paint these out a little bit. And if you recall those reference photographs, it was very tough. It was actually very difficult to see these hits. You had to actually kind of look for them. And so I don't want these hits to look like some big giant explosion hit these barrels at all. So I'm just doing a little bit of subtle painting here. My guess is that there would be a little bit of paint chip and a little bit of discoloration around where those impacts were. So to add a little bit of kind of a metallic-y, gun barrel-esque metal type exposure there, I've got a little bit of sky gray and just ever so slightly, just around those impact points, just kind of chip it out just ever so slightly. And then I'll add a little bit of green to that, so as I radiate away from the impact point, the hole, I just kind of blend it back out into the other part of the surface. The impact closest to the left here, so the closest to the vehicle, if you look at the reference photographs, there's a distinct kind of a ring, almost like a burn mark around that particular impact point. So I'll be working a little bit harder on that area. And I'm not, of course, sure exactly what colors those burn marks or rings are. So I've just added a little bit of a medium brown to this mix as well, and just starting to go, like, again, in a circular motion, just to kind of bring that out a little bit. It's, of course, very, very, very subtle. And then as a final step, which should be no surprise, just a little touch of oil paints, and that just kind of ties everything back together. And this happens to be a little bit of smoke and a little bit of ghost gray, a light green color, and I think that looks okay. And I think that takes care of it for this episode. So please enjoy these last photographs and the spinning models as we kind of recap what we've done today. If you do like this channel, please hit that like and subscribe, of course. And in the next video, let's see, what will we do? Well, we've got the base to work on, so that will be the focus. I think we could probably put everything together in one video, maybe two. We'll see how it goes. There's a lot to do there. Until the next time, take care, everybody, and, of course, happy modeling. See you soon.